And we are live. Welcome to episode 3 of Coddcast, Though All Men Do Despise Us. My name is Kyle Harwick. I'm here today with Paul and Will, who is not Jesse Eisenberg, in case you did not know that. I don't think he's related to Jesse Eisenberg either.
No, I
But
don't
Will,
think
how you
so.
doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Good. I have beer and water, and I'm up, so that's always a good start. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I too have beer and water and I'm up.
I'm glad that's a common theme between all of us. I'd hate for one of us to not be up. It'd be a very awkward podcast. Um, so, in case you're watching this video by accident and don't know what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about potentially one of the greatest hours of television that I've ever seen. Probably, definitely top 3 for Game of Thrones episodes. I guess we'll just go ahead and get initial reactions out of the way. Will, what were you thinking just while you were watching the episode and then immediately after when the screen went black for the credits? What was your thoughts?
My initial reaction to the stuff in the North was that was some of the best battle sequences that I've ever seen in any movie or TV show. Just the editing of it, it was so coherent. Everything felt like you knew where the forces on the army were. You knew what was happening at every step of the battle. Um, and it feels like it's so far evolved from something that was really amazing, like The Lord of the Rings, and has that huge epic feel to it. But when you really get down to sort of the nitty-gritty battle, it's sort of these quick cuts of really close-up fighting, and it sort of cuts from one thing to the next, and it's just sort of this whirlwind. And the whole battle sequence felt so coherent and so real to me that it was just really striking. That's what struck me on my first watch.
I think you summed it up pretty well there. And that's always been the difference between Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones slash A Song of Ice and Fire, is that Lord of the Rings is always this high fantasy where good would always triumph over evil, and good would do no wrong, and evil could only do wrong. And then you get Game of Thrones, where it's just this gritty fantasy. There's moral ambiguity. There's no black and white. It's all just shades of gray. And I think that's what this battle was. It was, this really intense scene, but you saw what wars really got down to, which is death. It's not very often that you see John, a main character, being in the nitty and gritty of the battle in this big, clusterfuck basically of people. That definitely stood out to me too. Paul, I think you pretty much have the same summarization as the two of us. But what else did you think coming out of that episode?
Well, building off your point with John, I do think it's interesting that they uglied him up and put him in the dirt and really made him show the toll of battle. Whereas in a more high fantasy context, the hero would kind of stand above everyone and I just feel like they did a good job of no, John is just another combatant, and yes, he got more camera time and all that, but he was put upon, he was bloody, he was grimy. They didn't try to make him out to be heroic in the traditional sense, I don't think. And I thought that was cool. Also, I just really like the use of phalanx, because that's a great military tactic that I just don't think history has seen enough of.
Right. One thing about the John sequence, because there was obviously quite a bit of John in this episode, but it was during the very fluid part of the battle where the camera, it seemed like it was all one take. Obviously, we know it probably wasn't, but there was a part where John looked like he was about to get killed. A guy came in, killed a guy that was attacking John, and John kind of grabs him and says, "Thank you," or "Good job, sir," and then he gets killed
Oh, I
instantly.
actually, so I watch with closed captioning on just because I hate to like miss a line.
Mhm.
And now I'm trying to remember what the exact line was, but he basically says, "Go tell," and then it's just like, nope, never mind. I think what he says is "send word," and then he gets cut
Oh,
off.
okay.
Send
Okay.
word to, but he doesn't even get to the to part. He's just, nope, never mind. That guy's dead. Forget it, John. I mean, like
Yeah.
the intensity of that battle was so amazing, and like, how often do you see, even in a medieval setting, characters dying of like crowd crush, like just being completely packed in and unable to breathe? Like that's a real thing that happens in big crowds, but you never see that in television.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's what sets Game of Thrones apart from any television we've ever seen, is they aren't afraid to show, um, I guess the darker side. That's not the exact word, but I guess not the heroic side.
Grittier, I guess I would say.
Yeah, yeah,
But I thought this battle in particular is one of the first times that they've done that. If you compare it to something like what was it, the episode where it was basically one big fight on the wall at the end of season, what was it? Season
4?
4. Yeah,
Yeah. That really felt like heroics, right? Like it was this band of plucky rangers on the wall holding out against these wildling forces, against overwhelming odds. And when you really think about it, the situation is much more complex than that, right? Like actually the wildlings, when you get right down to it, aren't the bad guys. And
right.
so you're dealing with sort of the
No.
political repercussions of that in season 6. But at the time in that battle, it was very much like, we did it, we won, we beat the fight. And it was sort of off-putting to me because in the book it's so clear that, like, that was such a long, dragged out, everybody's hungry and tired, and they're down to such tiny numbers that it was an amazing battle sequence on the show, but I thought it lacked a little bit in tone. But I thought they
Mhm.
nailed it in this episode, which I was surprised because they haven't necessarily done that in the past. So I don't know if you thought, it's sort of in tone with the rest of the show, but I thought in particular this episode did a really great job of making it seem like, yeah, there's violence and blood and guts like usual, but actually, like, consider what it would feel like to be there.
Right.
Yeah,
And
and that goes into that goes into I think some of the psychological stuff that went down like between Ramsay and John too. I felt like that was like another level of realism where you have two leaders who in their own way like have egos and are fairly arrogant and are doing everything they can to kind of outsmart and outwit the other person. And I thought that was another like cool aspect that they put a lot of depth into.
right. And I guess one of the overall themes for A Song of Ice and Fire is, you have to understand that George R. R. Martin is a pacifist. And even though he's writing this epic fantasy that's going to have these big war scenes, he's still writing it from a perspective that war in and of itself is horrible. And he wants to showcase these atrocities in a way. You see the people, the big pile of bodies with people, and they have their guts hanging out. They're not quite dead, but they're gonna die. And he wanted to show, and I think it goes into something that we're going to talk about later. He wanted to show that people shouldn't just write off the things they see on the news as things that just happen. He wanted to kind of show everyone that war is bad and it should not be fought.
Yeah, well, like look at the Riverlands. Like it's 3 seasons since the Battle of Blackwater, and the Riverlands are just still a total wasteland with no crops, no law. Like you're not safe traveling there, and it's
Yeah.
been 3 or 4 years in the Showtime, and it's still that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that takes us back to the scene with Lem Lemoncloak, and I guess we'll call him Septon Maribold. Um, they kind of write up and say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he says, "Oh, we're building a church. We're trying to rebuild." And then I don't know if it's a few hours or a few days later, everyone gets slaughtered at the hands of those three people. And it's very clear that outlaws are ruling that area, and you kind of have to. I guess it showcases the aftermath, basically, like you were saying. Um, I mean, we could talk about that all day, but I do want to talk about one scene in particular. A lot of people have been pointing this out. I don't know exactly what to call it, but when John's army gets encircled and they lower the spears down and have their shields and they just kind of close in, um, can we talk about how terrifying it would be to be inside of that circle and to be in like not necessarily the first row as soon as it happens, but like the second or third when you realize, oh shit, I'm going to die.
Yeah, it's not even the people in the very front who need to be the most scared because, you know, they're just going to back up. It's the people who are stuck against the wall who are going to get crushed to death who are going to be the first people to die. The people who are in the front, when it gets really dicey, they can run up between the spears and try to make their go for it one-on-one. But it's the people in the back or in the very middle who are probably going to be completely unable to breathe, which is what eventually we see happening to John.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and that goes back to when you were asking what to call it. Like, I called it a phalanx earlier, and, like, you know, that's not traditionally a horseshoe formation, but it was very much that, where they formed just a solid wall of shields with spears poking out.
Yeah, and I think they said that they had based it off of a battle that had happened in a Roman war in like 200 BC. I don't know what war that was, what battle it was. It's forgotten to me mostly, but they brought it into modern culture and used it like it was nothing. But yeah, like that was just a really cool scene. Not only to be, you know, in the center like John, but Tormund was on the outside and he, you know, tried to fight someone one-on-one, kind of got pushed back, which I'm surprised he didn't just die there, honestly. But yeah, like it wasn't a heroic one-on-one sword fight. It was, oh, I'm going to stab you with my spear, and if you try to come up and fight me, I'll just pull out my dagger and kill you.
Which, by the way, I did love that 1-1 was the phalanx breaker. He's just like, nah, like, these spears don't bother me. Don't
Right.
you.
Man, pour one out for the homie.
Yeah.
I love 1-1.
The giant pincushion that was 1-1.
Man, rest in power.
1-1, the character who only came about because of a football bet.
And could we talk about how Ramsay had the choice to essentially kill Tormund, John, or 1-1, and he decides to shoot an arrow into the eye of 1-1, who was already dying? Like, he could have had one of the two, like, big commanders of that battle, and yet he chooses the big-ass giant that's about to die anyways.
He's a racist.
I guess, yeah.
Racist against giants.
Big old giant racist.
He's a gigantic racist.
While we're still talking about the North, because there's a lot of Danny we can talk about, let's go ahead and talk about John's fist fight with Ramsay that ends with him just getting beat to a bloody pulp. I'll go ahead and ask Paul this first. Paul, on a scale of 1 to 10, how rewarding was that scene as a viewer? And I guess a reader, too.
I'm going to go ahead and rate it a 12. That was, oh my god. Like, especially the show. Like, Ramsay's bad in the book, but the show, like, every scene is him being evil. And so, for him to finally get his comeuppance and get it in such just, like, this brutal hand-to-hand manner, like, that was all you could ask for as a fan.
Yeah, we had never seen Ramsay at a disadvantage until the moment where he gets hit with the shield and just gets the shit beat out of him by John. That was the first time we had ever seen him not be in control, not be in charge of the situation. So it was definitely a 180 reversal of his character. We got to see Ramsay truly vulnerable instead of just putting on an act. Um,
And he totally, like, he tried to pretend he had the upper hand, like the way that he kept his sadistic smile.
Yeah, he never stopped grinning.
What's that?
yeah,
He never stopped grinning.
No.
until Sansa somehow snuck into his chamber and opened all the dog kennels, and then he realized he was basically dead at that point, and that's when he was like, "Oh crap."
So
I
let me
think
ask, Ramsay says to Sansa, now I'm part of you forever, or something like that. What do you think are the odds that Sansa is pregnant right now?
I I think it was more of a psychological "I'm a part of you now," because Sansa can never truly go back to the person that she was before she arrived at Winterfell to become Ramsay's
Hmm.
bride. She can never go back to that person, and so Ramsay will live on as long as Sansa does. Knowing the showrunners, though, she's probably pregnant. Yeah.
So, by the way, interesting
It'd be
question that someone brought up. Is Sansa a villain now?
She's definitely lost something of herself. And I mean, I was a little shocked when she had that moment with Jon looking over at Jon. I sort of thought that she was giving him a look like, we're better than this guy. You don't need to murder him with your bare hands. We can take him into
Right.
the jail. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I guess, that's sort of how it goes. And then, nope, she was looking at him like, I need to get my piece of the action. I
Yeah.
deserve this kill. And that's certainly not something that we would see from Sansa in the books, and it wasn't something that I was expecting to see from Sansa on the show. So it'll be very interesting to see going forward where we're at. I mean, we've had a series now of sort of season finales of Sansa, wearing the black dress and clearly becoming like a political player, and it's taken a little bit of time for that to blossom, but she's definitely her own woman now, and she's a force to be reckoned with, even against somebody like Jon, who's nominally on pretty much the same side as her.
Yeah, she's much more ruthless than he is. Like, he still has, like, kind of a naive ideology, whereas she's seen the worst the world has to offer and has come out of it, and, like, that really factors into, like, her decision making.
Yeah, and it's definitely weird because I'm actually watching. I got my parents into Game of Thrones, and I'm actually going back and watching the first season, and they just watched the episode with the mini fight between Joffrey and Arya and I guess the butcher's boy, and
Yeah,
Right.
it's not a mini fight for that dude, because that dude's
right,
dead.
right. But in the background, you just hear, stop it! You're ruining it! You're spoiling it! You're spoiling everything!" And it's insane to see how much Sansa has grown throughout the series, to go from that crying little girl to someone who would have picked up the sword and slaughtered Joffrey in the moment, that we're seeing in Sansa now. So it'll be interesting to see, because I guess she's the Lady of Winterfell now. Um, I guess. Like, they don't think Bran's alive, and Rickon was just killed, so does that mean Lady is head of Winterfell now?
It'll be interesting because, yeah, it either has to be her or Jon via discovering his parentage, and then my pet theory would be that he goes down into the crypt of Winterfell to bury Rickon and discovers Rhaegar's silver harp,
Hmm.
which is I admit it's pretty tinfoily. It's kind of a long shot, but it would make me incredibly happy if that's what happens. And they are setting up that he's going down into that crypt. And if that doesn't have anything to do with Lyanna, I would be shocked. So.
Hmm.
I mean, he has to find out somehow, and that certainly is a much more direct route than finding the reeds.
Right.
Right, like Bran can have his vision or whatever in the next episode, but how directly is Jon going to be informed of it? So something has to happen down in that crypt. And I don't know that Howland Reed is writing in and saying, "Oh, by the way, I remember.
Yeah.
I've been busy, but now I'm here."
So I guess my next question, since I still want to be on the topic of the Starks, who's going to reunite at Winterfell first, Bran or Arya?
Well, the travel now is like instantaneous, right? You can travel pretty much from anywhere to anywhere in the span of one episode.
Right.
So Arya could very well be at Winterfell in the next episode. Bran, I think, will have to make a pit stop at the wall, right? You'd think that he's going to get to the wall, and then the wall's going to come down, and that'll probably be the end of the season, would be my guess. So I don't know that he's going to make it to Winterfell in the next episode. But I suppose that Jon could ride back north again. I don't really know what they're going to do at Winterfell now that they've defeated Ramsay.
My other question is Arya's first priority going to be getting to Winterfell?
I'm sure she'll hear word because Bravos is pretty far in the north. So when she travels to wherever she's going, which is what, Salt Pans or
It should be White Harbor, but it'll probably be King's Landing. But if she's going to the north, it would be White Harbor.
Yeah, but I could totally see her, given who's still left on her kill list and given what she knows about the world. I could totally see her going to King's Landing before she goes to Winterfell.
Yep, I totally agree.
Okay, so who knows? We might see Arya in King's Landing in the next episode, for all we know. Or she goes east. We could see her in Essos with Dany and Marine.
Oh gosh, I never even considered that possibility.
I mean, she did say she was going home, but yeah.
Where is she in the Mercy chapter in Winds of Winter? Because I never read that.
Bravos.
She's still in Bravos.
Yeah, because that's I think when she's Mercy, she's playing in like a mid-level actors guild.
Okay.
So it's like not quite in the low end of town, but it's not high society.
I really need to read those chapters. Now that the show's ahead, there's no reason not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, it's impossible to know what's going to be different from book to show. But I think there are definitely some things that we've seen in the show that are going to be in the books, like Jon's resurrection. Benjen. I think we'll see Benjen again in the books.
Mm-hmm. Is Benjen Cold Hands?
No.
Seems to be no, right?
Yeah, I think they just combined two roles in the show to make a familiar face.
As they are wont to do.
Right. I don't blame them. I really don't blame them.
No, not at all. It's a much cleaner narrative arc, but like it seems pretty clear that in the books, like, it is not like he's been around for way longer, and B, there's the rumor that like in one of the edits of Dance of Dragons, like the editor writes in the margin like Benjen, and Martin writes right below it like no.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a rumor. It's in his collected manuscripts at UT. So.
Right.
Yep, he did write that, and you'd think if he's going to be straight with anybody, it's probably with his beta readers or whatever. So,
I guess while we're talking on theories, it seems that Clegane Bowl was canceled, and this is kind of going back to episode 8. How disappointed were you guys? We'll start with Paul.
Well, in our last podcast, I said that I didn't really see it happening anyway. And so I definitely could have been a lot more disappointed. Like, in the end, I already wasn't expecting it, certainly not anytime soon. And so having it ruled out, I mean, Trial by Combat's great TV. I would have loved to see it, no matter who was involved. But it would have been cool. Maybe it still happens down the road for some totally different reason, but I'm not, like, broken up about it.
Let me put it this way. Sandor Clegane is back for a reason. Gregor Clegane is back for a reason. Those character arcs are going to have payoffs. It might not be a trial by combat, and they might not ever meet each other, but I think at the very least, like, they wouldn't bring Sandor back on the show if his arc is basically he finds peace with himself over the course of like 2 episodes and goes off to a monastery. Like, there has to be more to it than that. There has to be. And the same with, Sir Strong. I don't even know if they call him. They pretty much just call him Gregor on the show, right?
Yeah.
They don't really try to hide that fact. But like, he has to do more than just bash a couple skulls in. Like, there has to be some kind of big payoff for that. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what their end game is, but it's something exciting. So I hold out hope for something.
So I saw a tweet about this today while we're talking about Robert Strong. Someone was ranking the fighters of Westeros and into a top 5, and it was kind of a consensus that the Mountain or Robert Strong or whatever you want to call him was number 1. But my counter argument to that was that the last time we saw the Mountain really fight someone, other than just crushing people in the streets for saying they showed their cock to Cersei, was when he fought the Viper, and he lost pretty handedly. Like, he lost in every way. He lost that trial by combat. The only reason he isn't dead is because the Viper wanted justice. So, who is your top 3 fighters in Westeros, and do you think that anyone has a chance to take down the Mountain? We'll start with you, Will. And you
I was hoping you were going to start with Paul.
we can start with Paul.
I wanted you to start with Will. Come on.
All right, so eeny, meeny, miny, Will.
Okay, all right. Here's what I got. Top 3 all time. We're saying, or top 3 living.
Let's go as of season 6, episode 9. So Jaime with the golden hands, and then several fighters dead. So I would have put
all the good fighters, I would say, are pretty much dead at this point. Like, I would have said top 3 all time: Arthur Dayne, number 1, Barristan, probably number 2. Although on the show he gets beaten pretty badly in a way that I wouldn't think would happen. Number 3 would say maybe Jaime in his prime, or probably not Ned. But left alive, who's a good sword fighter who's even left alive? I guess Jon is probably towards the top at this point.
I was also going to throw in Ron. Oh,
sorry,
yeah. Loras?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Loras is almost like he's on the verge of death pretty much, right? Like,
right.
He can barely hold a sword.
Yeah, I mean, top 3 is a really difficult one for me, too. I think you have to put Arthur Dayne at number 1. 2 and 3 can get kind of competitive. I think I still put Barristan at number 2. But yeah, I think number 3 for me, all time. Maybe Rhaegar or Robert Baratheon as well. Robert with his Warhammer was a force to be reckoned with. As of current ones, I think probably Bronn, I guess, because he did a lot of work for Jaime and the Dorne plotline.
Well, and he won a trial by combat.
Yeah, he did for Tyrion. I guess the Mountain's still alive, but I guess I'll put him in
this
there.
is something that Jason Concepcion brought up that I agree with, is like the Mountain is physically imposing and like he uses his strength to his advantage, but like when it comes to skill, like he's not even close. Like he's not a technically proficient fighter.
No.
I would want him on the battlefield over anybody.
Oh,
but
for sure.
One-on-one is a completely different situation.
And we saw that in the trial by combat for Tyrion. When the Viper was fighting for Tyrion, he kind of found the Mountain's weak points and attacked them. Obviously, he was cheating so that the Mountain would die either way, even if the Viper died. As long as he landed a blow on him, he was poisoned. Which is, I would probably, if we were doing this a little earlier in the series, I would put the Viper on my list because he was insanely good. Got a little cocky. It's the only thing. But yeah, I think Arthur and Barristan are a safe top 2. The final 3, I think, could be between 3 or 4 people. But as of right now, I think Bronn's probably in the top 3 for fighters in Westeros, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, That's the total war, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. I would put John up there too.
John's
Just
definitely up there. Yeah.
just
if
because
you're
of that
talking
battle
about-
scene.
Yeah.
Just because of that carefully choreographed battle scene. Um, but yeah, it's a really tough question, and it really depends on if you're talking in, one-on-one, or if you're talking in a war, or if you're talking in like wooden sword play.
One name we left out of living fighters would be Brienne, who's definitely in the top 5.
Yeah, I would put her
She's
top
been
5.
she's been kicking some butt lately.
And I guess the Hound is still alive too.
True.
He's really good, as we've seen. And I all time another name to bring up would be Khal Drogo. Never lost a fight in his life. He only
He
died.
was in the Eastern Conference, to be fair.
Still, pretty tough competition among the calls out there.
No, it's true. It's true. It's just hard to say. It's hard to say how he would have done against a Western knight.
Also in the Eastern Conference is Dario. That's
Right.
a name that should be mentioned. And I guess Jorah's in the Eastern Conference as well.
Eh,
So
not a noted fighter.
okay, so
Belwas would be in there.
yeah.
Oh yeah, Belwas is in there.
Well, if we're going with books, then Barristan Selmy is still alive, and he would be in the Eastern Conference.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
who you
but
got?
Barristan's played in the West.
Sure. Sure. So okay. So West versus East, top 3. Who you got?
Well,
Just in a 3-on-3 matchup.
Yeah, I would take Arthur Dayne, Barristan Selmy, and Jaime Lannister versus Khal Drogo, Dario, and Dany with her dragons?
Yeah.
Is that allowed?
No, I mean,
there's
the
nothing
top-
in the rulebook that says anything
Wait,
about dragons.
wait. Is Drogon LeBron James?
Yeah, for sure. He's the goat who went away for a while and then came back to his home city to wreck some fools with his queen.
With the 3rd pick, we select a Warlock of Karth? That could be right.
With the 3rd pick, we select Quaith. Okay, so that was the
Just went
best
off the
side.
rails.
Yeah, that was the best sidetrack ever, honestly. Well, now that we're in the East, let's stay in the East. Talk about, I guess, vengeful Dany, because she wants to kill everyone and let the gods sort them out, which I think is badass, but it's probably not the best strategy for keeping these cities in control. I don't know what else to say, but what were your guys' thoughts on the Dany subplots for this episode, basically? We'll start with Paul.
Well, the first thing I want to start out with is Grey Worm pulling off the most badass like bait and switch kill ever.
Yeah, the double knife, the double throat slicing of those 2 emissaries.
Put the guy forward, and he's just like, nah, like you 2 are so willing to offer this guy up, then you're the ones who deserve to die.
You make joke.
Can we also, just real quick, can we talk about the greatest joke that Game of Thrones has made? Happened in the last episode. It was said by me, Cindy, if you remember. She goes, 2 translators are on a sinking ship, and one of them says to the other, "Do you know how to swim?" And she says, "No, but I can yell for help in 19 languages." Best joke of the show ever.
Tyrion selling their awful jokes was amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
That was a pretty good scene.
I was kind of upset that that scene was ended with, the slavers coming in and enacting war upon Meereen, because I would have liked to see, Missandei and Grey Worm get a little drunker and just continually tell shitty jokes. It's very, very reminiscent of the scene in, I think it was the beginning of season 2 or the very end of season 1, where Tyrion meets Shay for the first time, and Shay, Tyrion, and Bronn are up late telling jokes and telling each other stories about themselves. It was very reminiscent of that scene, and we didn't really see the second part coming, but yeah. So her dragons escape inexplicably to come in and save the day. After
I thought they'd been out like for a while.
right, and why did they choose that time to break through the wall? Like, had they been tunneling?
Because I really think they've made it kind of clear that she has some degree of psychic connection with her dragons.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think that moment made sense in that respect.
Yeah, and especially because she commanded Drogon to burn the ship or whatever, but she didn't tell her other two, which I am forgetting the names of.
Viserion and
Rhaegal.
Rhaegal.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to say their names because I'm not versed in it right now, and I don't want to mess it up. But the other two dragons, they weren't commanded Dracarys, yet Dracarys did, however you say that, in the past tense. But yeah, it was a really cool scene. Just the amount of control that Dany had over the situation that we all kind of thought was lost, at least I did. And her Dothraki horde coming out of nowhere to wipe out the Sons of the Harpy that were, for some reason, killing people outside of the city. But yeah, it was good. That's what I'll say.
It's narratively it's a satisfying wrap up to a long subplot in her storyline.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people thought that she would be in Westeros by, the end of season 2. And it was not. It was not to be. But I think, now she's got an army, and she's got ships, and she's got her dragons, and I think it's time to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and you mentioned...
Which, by the way, can I just say that I really wish she had taken up Yara on her offer, and we could have had Westeros with 2 queens?
That would have been
those
cool.
Two are great. They have super chemistry.
Yeah, they were smiling at each other the whole time. I think Yara wants to fuck the ass off of that one, like she said to Theon at the end of 8. Which I want their teleporter. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, man, but yeah.
So she has her ships, like you guys said. I think that's the only positive thing that came out of that interaction, other than the definite marriage that's going to happen between Yara and Dany. So this is a good transition into the article that Will wrote today for Laconic Mnemonic regarding Dany's marine plot and her kind of conquering of Slaver's Bay to the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And Will, I'm going to turn it to you for a while. Paul, you can interject as you feel fit. But Will, kind of take us inside that article and what made you want to write it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so the writing of A Dance with Dragons is part of one of many long delays of the series of Song of Ice and Fire, but really the longest one, which was the gap before A Feast for Crows. And what ended up happening is that he essentially split Feast and Dance, which were going to be one book, into 2 books, which were separated by character. But it's this 5 or 10 year period that he's trying to untangle this Myronese knot, which is the problem of how do I get all these characters, Dany and Tyrion, and Quentin and Euron, in and out of Meereen, and how do I resolve all these plots, and how do I make everything work? And it just became way more complicated than what he originally thought. And in the time that he's writing this, 9/11 happens, the invasion of Afghanistan happens, the invasion of Iraq happens, and then it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on, right? And it didn't wrap up like this neat little liberating invasion that we thought it was going to be. It ended up turning into something that had much longer reaching consequences, and something that became, this long ordeal that didn't have any clear solutions. And So to me, the sort of saga of Martin writing the book kind of paralleled what was going on there. But more specifically, I think that Danny's plot really comes to echo not so much the specific beats, although it does involve, military occupation of a foreign culture in the East that they don't really understand. But the more important thing, I think, is the sort of lesson of you can be greeted as a liberator in a country and you can come in with the best of all possible intentions and things can still go really, really badly for you. And you can be stuck in charge of something you didn't want to be in charge of and with no real way of understanding the population or how to fight against this, sort of uprising of people that you've stripped of power. And so I think ultimately we're seeing at the end of this storyline, yeah, Dany might have her dragons and her ships and going to Westeros now, but, she didn't really bring a whole lot of good to the area. She was leaving behind a lot of struggle and strife, and it's not entirely clear. Maybe one of you guys can tell me what your take on this was, but what the deal she cut with the Masters is. Like, clearly she has the upper hand, but it doesn't seem like necessarily she's going to put them out of power. Like, slavery, it seems like it's still going to be around in Slaver's Bay after she's gone, despite all of her efforts for years to get rid of it in the area.
Well, and that's the thing is that, like as soon as she leaves, she can't enforce it anymore. Like, her energy is going directed towards Westeros, and so no matter how afraid of her they might have been, how afraid of her dragons they might have been, etc., the minute she crosses the sea with her army, like, there is nothing keeping them from just implementing the old system.
Yeah. There's a really evocative moment in Dance with Dragons where she leaves Astapor, and she leaves Astapor, they say, in charge of a council of 3 men. And I don't remember exactly, but it's something like a scholar and a merchant and, like these 3 wise men of peace. And then a week later, the report comes, they're all dead. Cleon the Butcher is in charge now.
Yeah.
And it's just this, like, amazing example of, like, the best of all possible intentions, and immediately reality kicks in, and the worst possible people come to power.
Your analogy of, like, that's kind of the Afghanistan to Marines Iraq, because, like, we had Afghanistan in pretty good shape until we decided to divert our forces, divert our attention to and, the same thing kind of happened. Like, yeah, I'm leaving Astapor in pretty good shape. Like, I'm leaving these people in charge. I'm focusing my energy elsewhere. And the minute she focused her energy elsewhere, it just all went to hell.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the entire time that I was reading Will's article and listening to you just now, you could honestly replace any of the nouns with either side, and it would have fit. Like you were talking about Dany and Marine, and you could have replaced it with the United States and Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was exactly the same. And so George said he didn't intend on them being the same thing. He didn't intend on any political entanglements in his book, but he totally wrote that. Like, whether or not you intend it to happen is one thing, but it happened.
Yeah.
And so I think George should, I guess, be more forthcoming with the comparison, because he is very much a man of peace. He writes about war all the time in a lot of his books, but it's always in the way that he shapes it that peace is always the better option. And so it would not surprise me if he was completely lying and that he completely intended it, and that's why it took 6 years for Dance to come out.
Yeah, and then I will go back to the point that Will made in his article that I think is very salient, that even if he wasn't consciously trying to write the allegory, like, you're drawing inspiration from the world around you, and the world around him at the time, like, included this political entanglement, this military entanglement, just dominating the news. And so even if he didn't set out to write it as an allegory, that doesn't mean that it didn't factor into his writing.
Yeah, I think the political landscape in not only post 9/11 but post sort of combat operations in Iraq stretching into the occupation is just, it was such a sort of cynical, negative look at war and what war can accomplish, and just so much weariness on the part of the nation. 8 years into a war that we thought would be over in a month, and I just think whatever you claim ostensibly to be doing, it has to influence the way you're thinking about these things. And as he was looking at Danny's storyline and how do I resolve this, I think just through that lens, the natural outcome of these things were for everything to get more complex and more difficult for her, and not have a simple solution like the 3-book Song of Ice and Fire might have had originally.
Yeah, and I think what it ends up being is that it comes down to that no idea is original, is 100% original. Everything is based off of some influence that you gathered from something that you did for some reason. And so while A Dance with Dragons may not have been, like he wasn't like, hey, I'm going to write about the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, he ended up doing it just kind of subconsciously. And so I guess props to George, but take credit where credit is due. Yeah, he wrote a really good book, and it makes a really good analogy towards that. So I think even if he didn't mean it, he should just be like, yeah, I totally meant it, whatever. Especially because these books have been his baby for the past 20 years.
He certainly means whatever he says. He certainly intends the lessons about war and occupation and dealing with foreign cultures and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's definitely so.
Yeah, he has some like overarching themes of religion is bad, or religion is weird. Not religion is bad, but religion is weird. That monarchy and I guess capitalism, even though it's not existent in Westeros or Essos, is bad. I guess feudalism is the better word for that. War is bad, and I think there's one other theme that he likes to use in A Song of Ice and Fire, and it fits really well with A Dance with Dragons, and even in season 6, all 3 of those that I've mentioned have been present in season 6.
Mm-hmm.
Which props to David and Dan. Honestly, they're getting George's message across, even though they're taking some things and cutting it and inflating other things. So
yeah, like I said, I think the show has tended to sort of lose sight at times of that kind of pacifist notion of Martin's, but I thought this past episode did a better job of that than any other one in the entire series. So props.
Yeah, and I think David and Dan did write this past episode. So definite props to them. I think they need to be the primary writers going forward. Have they written every episode, or have there been other writers? I don't remember.
I haven't paid enough attention, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing, because obviously I'm watching season 1 again, I'm seeing their name at the beginning of every episode written by David and Dan, but I'm noticing it more in this season than I have in the past. So maybe it's just me being a keen observer because I'm doing a podcast now, but who knows?
Yeah, well, in the past, George has taken the epic battle episodes. So if they wrote, I'm going to look it up right now, but if they wrote this one, that would be a departure because he wrote Blackwater. He wrote, I think, the Battle at the Wall. I think he wrote Hard Home. In general, he's taken the battle episodes.
Yeah, and I know he wasn't going to write any of the episodes going forward because of the Winds of Winter and wanting to get that out. I don't think we'll see George's name as a writer on the show anymore, which is unfortunate, but I also want the Winds of Winter and him to be alive for whatever the 7th book is called, something with spring. I don't remember.
Dream of
Dream
Spring.
of Spring. Yeah.
A dream of a dream of spring.
Yeah. So was there anything else you guys wanted to touch on before we kind of close out here?
No, I mean, I thought we're building up to potentially some pretty amazing things happening in the next episode. Like, I think there could be some payoff with John and his parents and maybe the wall coming down. So if that happens, it's going to be pretty exciting.
I kind of forgot that this episode wasn't the last episode of the season. We still have another week of Game of Thrones, and then, the 30 months of sadness that follow, which I don't think we're ready. We just saw the
What
NBA
do you think of the
season
odds
end.
that they give us a release date for Winds of Winter at the end of the season?
I would cry.
5%? 10%?
I would cry.
He met with the editors recently.
1%. I don't think.
You know what? I think because we haven't heard a damn thing at all about the Winds of Winter, that I'm going to give it 25% that at the end of episode 10, they're going to say, and look forward to the Winds of Winter on August 24th or something like that.
Lose it.
And we'll all just get on Amazon and refresh the page until we can pre-order the Winds of Winter.
Well,
oh man.
And it is the title of the final episode.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which, by the way, I did look it up. Benioff and Weiss did write episode 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I don't know. I'm curious to see which plot lines they resolve and which ones they leave open. I feel like there are too many threads to wrap up all in the next episode, and so I'm kind of curious to see how they select those.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to do a rapid fire section with you guys real quick. I'm going to name a character, and you guys are going to tell me whether or not you think that they're going to be in episode 10. No explanations. Just, do you think we will see them? And I will start with Sam. Either one of you go.
No.
Yeah, I was leaning no as well.
Okay. So Gilly, no, then.
No.
Arya.
No?
I'm going to say no again.
Okay. Bran and company.
Yes.
For sure.
Oh man, okay, Dolores Ed.
Yeah, I think we'll see the wall.
I think if we see Bran, we're gonna see the wall.
Okay. Jamie.
Yeah.
Yes. I think there will be King's Landing scenes.
Brienne and Pod.
No.
No?
Don't know.
Okay.
I feel like they're going to come back north, and I feel like that we may not get much, if anything, at Winterfell.
Okay. And then my last one, because I think this one's going to be the most split, but the Hound.
I mean, yes, right?
I hope so.
Bring them back for what they did, and then.
I think they just leave season, yeah.
What about Varys? Are we going to see his A Dance with Dragons epilogue?
Yeah, and that's all we're going to refer to it as, because I know there are only show watchers that are watching right now, so I don't want to spoil that for them. But do you think that the A Dance with Dragons epilogue is going to happen? I know I asked Paul this on our last podcast. Will, what do you think?
In some form, I don't think that show watchers necessarily remember who Kevin Lannister is.
He's been in this season though.
And yet I still think that most show watchers don't know who he is.
But it's also more than just him though. You have to remember that. It's more than just him.
Right.
And I think that
I would say
I think that
I'll let you know, because I've already said.
I think the show can expend some other characters as well. So it might not be those two. Might also be like a Lord Tyrell, or potentially even a Qyburn because he's been really powerful.
Honestly, at this point, Dany's going to show up to Westeros and just it's going to be a push. She's not going to have anything to fight other than maybe the White Walkers, but there's
Right.
certainly not going to be any armies in the mainland who are able to oppose her.
Right.
That's kind of what I was thinking about, like when they talked about all the different, like in the after show, they talked about all the different like factors she had in her armies, where she's got the Unsullied and the Second Sons and this giant Khalasar and all this, and I'm just thinking like there aren't real armies left in the Seven Kingdoms. Like she's gonna roll these guys.
The largest army is probably the Vale army in the north.
Yeah, or the Faith Militant.
Yeah, but they're not really. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what their feelings on fighting for the crown are.
Yeah. I have one last question before we close it out. Does Dragonfire kill White Walkers?
Yes. Categorically.
Categorically? So, okay.
Dragon Glass kills White Walkers.
Yeah, like
True.
I just feel like most of the things that kill White Walkers are like ancient magic, and Dragonfire very much falls into that. Right. Plus the fact that fire is how you fight against the Whites.
Okay. So do you think that the wall has to come down for dragons to be able to get to fight the White Walkers?
I don't see Dany going north of the wall to fight them, that's for sure.
Nah. Because, like, the King's Landing, even to this point, is unaware that that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And she's even removed from King's Landing.
True. But
so, unless the only way I could see it is if that Red Priestess that's hanging out ends up getting a lot of influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which she very well could be. Or could get that influence.
It's possible.
So I think we are going to close it out on that note. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about?
I'm good.
No, Sunday night was a great night for TV.
Yeah, for sure. I actually do want to end with kind of a little bit of a spiel. I hope you guys can bear with me. I think both of you will agree with me on this, but Game of Thrones is a show that's very much built around violence and then peace being the alternate option. And as most of our viewers probably know, and I know both of you know, there was a big vote in the Senate today on 4 bills to pass some gun control laws, and all 4 of the bills were rejected. And I just wanted to extend this to our viewers that if you think that there should be gun control laws in place beyond what we already have, and you live in a zone where your senator voted no on those bills, take action and write in to your senator, tell them that you want these gun control bills to be passed, and don't let them control our lives, because prayers and thoughts can only go so far, and I think that action needs to be taken. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I just wanted to throw that in the last second.
Yeah. Call your senators. Call your representatives.
I feel you on that, and like I live in Texas, like I know how my senators voted.
Yeah. So I guess if you're still with us at this point and you live in an area where your senator voted no, luckily both of the Illinois senators voted yes. I think they have that Chicago poll that's on them that says that they basically have to. But if you live elsewhere, definitely check it out. Take action. That's basically the only way they'll hear us. So with that, I'm going to end it. Guys, you enjoy the rest of your week. Definitely we'll see you at some point next week for another podcast. But other than that, everyone enjoy your night, and I'll see you guys later.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.